Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Samasta Jana Kalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Satgurum Brahma Vidvaram. Namah Shri Shankarananda Guru Padam Bhujanmane Savila Samaha Graha Grasaika Karmane. Right? So let us read verses 35 and 36. Okay? Navyapitva deshatontaha nityatvannapi kālataha navastutopi sarvatmyat anantam brahmani tridha deśa kāla anya-vastūnām kalpitatvacha māyā na deśādikritontosti brahmanantyam spurtam tataha. So just a little overview, because now it's our first class in the new year. How did this chapter start? It said that this Brahman is within a cave. And this cave, this guha, is a parampara. It's a lineage. It's a lineage. Now what is this cave? This cave is nothing but the identification with the 5 sheets. And so to understand what Brahman is, first we have to uncover the 5 sheets and identify with them. So we went through each sheath. The annamaya kosha, the food sheath. We said we are not the food sheath because the body, the food sheath, is temporary. Then the pranamaya kosha, we said we're not pranamaya kosha because it's jada, it's inert. It's inert. Then we are not the manomaya kosha or the mental sheet because again, that keeps changing from moment to moment. And we are not the intellectual sheet or vijñānamaya kosha because that's subject to dissolution. Intellect gets dissolved in deep sleep. And we are not the anandamaya kosha because it's also temporary. The bliss sheath, it's temporary. We experience some highs. Then after that, we feel low again. So therefore, the objection was, then there must be nothing there. Then Swāmi Vidyāraṇya ji says, well, because there's an experience of the sheets, there must be an experiencer. So now we have to inquire into the nature of that experiencer. It's not that there's nothing there. There's an experience, there's an experiencer. So what is the nature of that experiencer? In the Upanishads, particularly in Taittiriya Upanishad, it has been given 3 lakshanas or indicators. They are satyam, jñānam, anantam. Satyam means pure existence or being, jñānam, pure consciousness, and anantam, pure bliss or infinitude. Because only in infinitude there's bliss. So first he took the subject of jñānam. He explained exactly how we are pure consciousness. And the description given was that consciousness is aparoksha, means it is so self-evident that in every single experience there's consciousness. In fact, it is the nature of experience. So in every experience there is consciousness, and this consciousness is directly who we are. And it is self-effulgent. It doesn't need any pratyaksha instruments. It doesn't need any seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting. It doesn't need any thinking. It illumines all of these, in fact. And without consciousness, nothing would be able to function. So our nature of jñānam, or consciousness, was established. Then satyam, he said that satyam means bāda rahitam, that which cannot be negated. So everything about us Our bodies, our minds, our egos, all of these can be negated, but the self can never be negated. We have never experienced our absence. We've never experienced it. Even in deep sleep, we don't experience our absence. So that which cannot be negated, that is you, that is Brahman. So in this way, satyam was also established. Now he's establishing anantam. And how is he establishing anantam? First he said, anantam, or something that's infinite, means something that's not limited by space, time, or object. So, because Brahman is all pervading, it is not limited in space. Because Brahman is eternal, it is not limited by time. And because Brahman is the cause of everything, it is not limited by any object. So, it is all pervading in space. That means it doesn't have, when we think about space or when we are in space, we are limited by space because we are here, but we're not there. But when something is all pervading, how do you say that they're here and not there? They're everywhere, basically. When we say we're limited by time, there are points where this ego exists and there are points where it doesn't exist. It's limited in time. But Brahman is said to be eternal. And when we say limited by object, it means I am me, but I'm not you, and you are not me. But Brahman is in every single object, in every single being, because it is the substratum of all. It is the cause of all. Then he says, wait. Actually, that is incorrect. Because space, time, and objects, they are all superimpositions on Brahman. So even to say that Brahman is not limited by space because it's all pervading, that's not that deep enough. Actually, space is superimposed in Brahman. Time is superimposed in Brahman. Object is superimposed in Brahman. It's like the waves. So space, time, object are like waves. And Brahman is water. So they are all superimpositions on Brahman. And without water, the wave cannot exist. So without Brahman, there's no existence of space. Because Brahman, where is space? We have this thing called space. Where is space? The substratum of space is in Brahman. So the substratum of space is Brahman. Where is time? The substratum of time is Brahman. And where is any object? The substratum of any object is Brahman. It is existence consciousness. So they cannot limit Brahman because Brahman is their very substratum, and they cannot limit Brahman because they're only an appearance in Brahman. Can the wave ever limit water? No. And they cannot even exist without Brahman. So if we look at it a little deeper, there's one time where we say, okay, there is a snake on the rope. Okay, fine. So on the rope, there is an appearance of the snake. Fine. The rope is beyond the snake. The rope is not affected, untouched by the snake. Fine. But at the end of the day, rope alone is. Rope alone is. If we look at the deepest knowledge, it's not that there's a snake appearing on the rope. And it is not that the rope is beyond the snake and unaffected by the snake. The deepest knowledge is there's only rope. There's only rope. So how can the snake control the rope? How can the snake limit the rope if there's only rope? Even if you say snake is an appearance on rope, that appearance can never control reality. The false can never control the truth. So all this talk about, that space doesn't limit Brahman and time doesn't limit Brahman, object doesn't limit Brahman, we have to go even deeper than that. Brahman is ananta, it's infinite, because actually Brahman alone is. That's why it's infinite. There's nothing other than Brahman. And therefore, that's why nothing can limit it. So in this way, very clearly, he establishes anantam. And he says that all of these limitations are experienced by us due to māyā. Now the question arises that, okay, what about jīva and Īśvara? And this is where we left off. Jīva, that individual being, and Īśvara, the Lord. What about jīva and Īśvara? Are they limiting Brahman? Can they limit Brahman? So this is where we are at. Now see verse 37. Satyam jñānam anantam yat. Satyam jñānam anantam yat. Brahma tadvastu tasya tat. Brahma tadvastu tasya tat. Īśvaratvam ca jīvatvam. Īśvaratvam ca jīvatvam. Upādhidvaya kalpetam. Upādhidvaya kalpetam. Satyam jñānam anantam yat. Brahma tadvastu tasya tat. Īśvaratvam ca jīvatvam. Upādhidvaya kalpetam. Okay, so what does this verse say? This verse says that this Brahman is satyam, of the nature of existence, jñānam, consciousness, and anantam, infinite. This Brahman is infinite. Yat Brahma, so that Brahman which is existence, consciousness, and infinitude, tad vastu, that is reality. That is reality. Tasya, tasya here means of that Brahman, of that reality. Tat īśvaratvam ca jīvatvam, that Īśvaratva, that lordliness, and jīvatva, that sense of individuality. So that sense of God and the sense of individuality, upādhidvaya kalpitam. That is just due to upādhi. That is just imagined. That is just projected, kalpitam, because of conditionings, of two conditionings. So, Brahman, who is existence, consciousness, and infinity, is the reality. It's being Īśvara, the omniscient Lord of the world, and jīva, the individual soul, are mere superimpositions by the two illusory adjuncts, māyā and avidyā, respectively. So what does this say? See, it's like this. Very simple. If you think of a point, and you draw, let's say, a circle, a small circle around that point, that's circle A, and then that same point, you draw a big circle, circle B. So what happens here is the point is the same. Point is the same, right? But with respect to this point, the first circle is a smaller circle. With respect to the point, the first circle is a smaller circle. And with respect to the point, the next circle is a bigger circle. But the point is the same. So the point, when it's associated with a smaller circle, it's called jīvā. And the point, when it's associated with a bigger circle, it's called Īśvara. That's all it is. It's the same point. It's the same consciousness. So it's not, jīva and Īśvara are not limiting limiting Brahman in any way. It is that same Brahman that appears as jīva. It appears as jīva when out of ignorance we identify with this limited adjuncts or upādhis, which are the body, the mind, the intellect. When we identify with this limitedness, we are called jīva. And when associated with totality, with the total gross, subtle, and causal bodies, when we are associated with totality, then we are called Īśvara. So it is that same Brahman that appears as jīva, that same Brahman that appears as Īśvara. It just depends on the upādhi or the conditioning. When the conditioning is vyashti, or the individual gross, subtle, causal body, then that is jīva. And when the conditioning is a total gross, subtle, causal body, that is Īśvara. So even in Panchadashi, later on in chapter 10, it says that that same Brahman appears as jīva and that same Brahman appears as Īśvara. It's just the upādhi that's different. So now someone might say, but what does this mean? What does this mean to us? It means that Brahman is infinite, that it can express in so many ways. If the root of creation is infinity, that means there are infinite possibilities. If creation is infinity, then there are infinite possibilities. And in fact, within you and me is infinity. We just don't recognize it. Because if you look at the simplest thing, like a seed, simplest thing like a seed. Now, what is the seed? You may say that the cover is the seed, the texture is the seed, but that's not the seed. Because within the seed, there's infinite potential. There's infinite number of trees, of flowers, of fruits. Within the seed, there's infinity. But when we look at the seed, we judge it by its outer cover. We judge it by its texture, by its look. But within it is infinity. So actually, if we look at everything, within it is infinity. What is within you and me is infinity. And this is Brahman. The common example given for upādhi is this crystal. And we have seen this also before, the crystal and the flower, right? So Brahman is compared to a pure crystal. And when a yellow flower comes near the pure crystal, the crystal appears yellow. But when a red flower comes near a pure crystal, it appears red. So that flower is called upādhi. So in the same way, when the conditioning of individuality is superimposed, it appears as jīva. And when the conditioning of totality is superimposed, it appears as Īśvara. Now, a note of caution here, this is not to say that Vedanta says you are God. Vedanta says the reality of you and the reality of God is one and the same. At the level when we are seekers, we very much have this love, this devotion, this reverence to Bhagavan, to God, because only through God's grace is mokṣa possible, is liberation possible. So as seekers, we keep this difference of I am jīva and this is Īśvara. Before knowledge. So we're going to look at it before knowledge and after knowledge. So before knowledge, we keep this difference that I am jīva and I worship Īśvara, and with Īśvara's grace, I can realize that I am free. But after knowledge, what happens? Does the jīva still worship Īśvara? After knowledge, what happens is Brahman worships Brahman. That's what it is. The enlightened being, after knowledge, now feels even more love and more reverence and more gratitude for Īśvara. Why? Because it is that Īśvara who helped purify me, who helped bless me, who guided me every step of the way. And it's because of Īśvara that I am here today. This is what the enlightened being feels. So after enlightenment, it is Brahman worshipping Brahman. That's why in the Bhagavad Gita we say, Brahmarpanam Brahmahavihi. After enlightenment, that being, that enlightened master, realized being, has more love and reverence for Guru, for Bhagavan, for everyone and every single being, because jnana or knowledge translates into love. The highest supreme knowledge is also called para bhakti. Madhusudana Saraswati, in his work, he's a great Advaitin, but he's a great Bhakta also. In one of his works, he says that the greatest, most supreme knowledge is supreme devotion, because it translates in a love for all beings. So an Advaitin should never get confused that, oh my gosh, Īśvara is just an appearance in totality. Īśvara is just an appearance in Brahman. So why am I worshipping Īśvara? An Advaitin should never get confused. It's Brahman worshipping Brahman. And not only that, after knowledge, what do enlightened beings do? They revel in the Leela of the divine. They revel and they say, this is the play of the Lord. This is the play of Māyā. In Ramayana, there's a beautiful episode where Lord Shiva and Parvati Devi, at that time her name was Sati Devi, they were together, they were sitting together, and they were witnessing the Ramayana. They were witnessing Sri Rama crying for Sita Devi. And as they were witnessing this, Lord Shiva was so happy because he said, Rama is playing such a beautiful role. He is the Supreme Lord and he's appearing to cry for his wife. He's appearing to weep. He's such a great actor. And for him, he was experiencing the thrill of the acting. But for Sati Devi, she was questioning, how is the Lord doing this? So that shows the difference between one who is enlightened. One who is enlightened can sit and revel at this whole play, whether it's good things good that are happening, negative things that are happening, whatever is happening. The enlightened being just sees the divine play. But the one who's not enlightened yet tends to question every single thing. So this is the attitude to have. There was one beautiful monk, and he used to tell everybody that Buddha was never born. Buddha was never born, and Buddha never walked in this earth, and he never died. But every day he used to go and worship Buddha. So people were asking him, they said, you're so crazy. You say Buddha was never born, he never walked on the earth, he never died, he was never here. Why do you go on worshiping him then? Why do you go to the temple every day and why do you bow to him? And he said, simple, I bow to him because he was never born and he never walked on this earth and he never died. And they said, what do you mean? And he said, to Buddha, his birth was an illusion. His walking on this earth was an illusion. And even his death was an illusion. And that's why I worship him, because he knew that it was all an illusion. So that's what it is. So even Īśvara and jīvā, even these notions cannot limit Brahman. Jīva and Īśvara are just appearances in Brahman. So you are not that jīva, you're not that individuality, not that ego that's only an appearance. And that's not so hard to see. That's very easy to see that this ego is just illusory. Right. Now the question comes as to what is this power that's causing all of this? Can you tell us more about this māyā? What is this power that makes us think that Brahman is limited or could be limited by anything at all? So now we go into the topic of māyā. Verse number 38. Shaktirastyeshwari kāchita Shaktirastyeshwari kāchita Sarvavastu niyamaka Sarvavastu niyamika Anandamayam Anandamayam Gudha sarveshu vastushu Gudha sarveshu vastushu Shaktirastyeshwari kāchita Sarvavastu niyamika Anandamayam Gudha sarveshu vastushu. So there is a Shakti. There's a Shakti. Shakti means power. Shakti asti means there is a power. And what is it? Aishwari. It is of Īśvara. Is of Īśvara. Kāchit. It is some kind of thing. Kāchit. Some kind of thing. Sarvavastu niyamika. And it regulates all the objects. It controls all the objects. From where? Anandamayam arabhya. From the bliss sheath. From the subtlest sheath. Arabhya. Starting from the bliss sheath. Sarveshu vastushu. Starting from there, in all beings, it regulates everything. And this māyā is gudha. Gudha means it is hidden. It's hidden. So there's a power called māyā of this Īśvara, which controls everything. It informs all objects from the bliss sheath to the physical body and the external world. So it is a Shakti. Shakti means it's a power. It's a power, but we say it is hidden. Why hidden? Because we can't really see power. We can't really see it with our own eyes. For example, fire has the power to burn. So we don't see the power to burn. But when something burns, we know there's a power that burns. We have the power of speech. We don't see the power of speech. But when people speak, we know that there's a power of speech. So it is a power that's hidden. And when we see its expression, then we understand that there is a power. There's a power. And it is that kind of power that causes the creation, sustenance, and dissolution of the world. It is the power of Īśvara. So, Īśvara is nothing but Brahman plus māyā. So, on Brahman, on that substratum Brahman, there's a superimposition of māyā. There's a superimposition of this power. And there's a superimposition of this power because we see that the world has power, the world has a force, and we question what that is. So the name given to that is māyā. But remember that this māyā is only from the standpoint of māyā, we give it the name māyā. What do I mean? As we said earlier, there's only rope, there's only Brahman. So in absolute reality, in the absolute sense, there's only Brahman. Whether it's a power, it's not a power, whether it's disappearance, whether it's not disappearance, it is all Brahman only. But when we are talking about the relative level, the vyavaharic standpoint, then we start to define things. So this Maya is that power of Īśvara, that Īśvara wields to cause the creation, the sustenance, the dissolution of this world. So it's Aishwari. And Kachit means it's some kind meaning it is not absolute reality and it is not absolute non-existence. It's not absolute reality because it gets negated. And it's not absolute non-existence because we can experience it. So it's this power that's not absolute reality, because upon realization, I recognize that everything is Brahman alone, but it's not absolute non-existence, because I experience it. So I can't quite point my finger on it. So Kachit, some kind of power. And it controls everything. It controls everything. Meaning that everything has or stays in its proper dharma. So starting from ordinary substances, that sugar is always going to be sweet and fire is always going to be hot. The sun is always going to be that source of heat and light. The moon is always going to be cooling. An orange seed will yield an orange plant. There's some niyamas, there are some rules, there's some laws of the world. That the earth rotates, that the earth revolves, that we have certain seasons, that certain things exist in certain seasons and not in other seasons. So there is a law, there's a law of how elements and chemicals are formed. There's a law of how they are mixed, how they are named, how they are called. There's a law of how animals live, that fish live in water and the frogs jump. They're in land and then they're in water. And mammals, a lot of them live in land. So there's a law. Whenever we see in creation that there is some kind of law that's being followed, there's no mixture, and it's going to say this in the next verse. There's no mixture. There is a law that's being followed. So whenever there's a law that's being followed, that means that there's a power behind it. There's a power behind it. There cannot be a law without a power. There has to be some rulership. So that rulership is called māyā, the power of Īśvara. So because there's law, the universe is a cosmos. It's not a chaos. There's a law. There has to be a controller. There has to be a power. There has to be a Shakti. And that is māyā. And these laws are in everything. In the field of science, in the field of math, and the law of gravity. The whole world, if you see, functions on these laws. And that we cannot deny. So now let us see the next verse. Vastu dharmaniyam yeran, vastu dharmaniyam yeran, shaktya naiva yada tada, shaktya naiva yada tada, anyonya dharma sankaryat, anyonya dharma sankaryat, viplavate Viplavate jagat kalu, viplavate jagat kalu, vastu dharmaniyam yeran, shaktya neva yada tada, anyonya dharma sankaryat, viplavate jagat kalu. So it says here, vastu dharma means the properties of all objects, their essential nature of all objects. Niyam yeran shaktya naiva yada means yada. if Shaktya Neva, if there was no Shakti, if there was no power to niyamyeran, to rule vastu dharma, all the properties of all objects, all the essential natures of all objects, tada, then what would happen? Anyonya dharma sankaryat. Then there would be a mixture of dharmas, right? What is cold would appear hot, what is hot will appear cold. There will be a whole mixture of dharmas. Viplavate jagat khalu. Viplavate. There would be chaos in the world, isn't it? So it says here, if the particular attributes of all objects are not determined by this power, there would be chaos in the world. For there would be nothing to distinguish the properties of one object from those of another. Therefore, this power must be accepted. So we cannot deny that there is this power. And when Īśvara wields this power, he's called antaryami, the all-powerful. Now, just think about this. It is because of this power that everyone functions in the world. We know that the sun will rise in the morning, that it will be day, and that's why we get up. And we know at night time the sun will set, and that's why we go to sleep. The mathematicians, those who calculate the weather, those who calculate astronomy, astrology, they can predict that the weather is going to be like this. Or, the seasons are going to be like this. The distance from this place to that place is going to be like this. When there's an eclipse, this is the belt of totality. They can predict because there's certain laws. There's certain laws that are always there, that are constant. So there has to be a ruler. And this is also a very beautiful point for establishing that at the root of creation, it has to be a conscious entity. Because an inert, insentient entity cannot rule the world like this. And even if we say it was atoms, it was molecules, it was particles, there's also an order in the way they function. The smallest particles, there's an order in the way they function, in the way they move. Isn't there a law? So how can something inert make up all of that? So at the root of creation is this Īśvara functioning with the power of māyā, yielding the world through these laws. And the essence of that is Īśvara. The essence of that is Brahman. Essence of that is Brahman. So it says here, if this law was not there, then everything would be absolutely mixed up. Okay. So today we'll stop here. I'm just going to summarize the thought flow so that we understand it very clearly. What we saw today basically is this, that Īśvara and jīva, they are only superimpositions on Brahman. What does that mean, first of all? First of all, nothing can limit Brahman, not any time, not any space, not any object, because there are superimpositions in Brahman. At the same time, jīva, the sense of individuality and the sense of lordship, they are also superimpositions on Brahman. They are appearances in Brahman. One is only called jīva with respect to the conditioning of the individuality. One is called Īśvara with respect to the conditioning of totality. But that's not to say that in our lives we discount Īśvara. That is to say, as I explained, even after enlightenment, there is in fact even more love, more reverence for Īśvara. Now, why is all of this happening? Why does it appear that there are limitations on Brahman? This appears because of māyā, the power of māyā. Māyā is this power which is used by Īśvara to wield the world. She is anya-vastūnām. She is the control of the entire world with Īśvara. She's the power of Īśvara. And we know that because every single thing in this world functions in a law. Everything has its dharma. Everything stays in its dharma. And therefore, if there is a law, there has to be power. And if there's power, there has to be somebody wielding that power. And that power is māyā. And the one wielding that is Īśvara. And that is how this whole world is appearing. But remember, the essence, the root of all of it is only Brahman. Only Brahman alone. From the ultimate standpoint, when realization dawns, everything is just Brahman, appearing in Brahman, playing as Brahman, only Brahman. But when we come to the relative standpoints and try to explain everything, that's when all of these terms become easy to guide us and take us along until we are able to go beyond. Okay? So I'll say the closing prayer, and then we can see if there are any questions. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.